Hey friends, it's Corey from Hey Let's Make Stuff, and in today's video we are going to be comparing two different mug presses. So over here on my right I have the Cricut mug press, and over here on my left I have a bargain mug press that I got on Amazon. Before we get started, I wanted to apologize for any background noise that you might hear in this video today. We are getting ready to take a big family trip tomorrow, and my husband is in the garage, which is directly below this space, getting everything ready for the car. So hopefully he won't be too loud, but if there is some sort of, noise in the background, that is why. I was recently talking to a friend about how much I really love my Cricut mug press, but she was sort of bemoaning the fact that it is kind of expensive. At full price, this thing is nearly $200, and that is just out of the budget of a lot of people. You can find it on sale most often for $179. It will often go on, extra sale for the holidays and at special times during the year for about $149, but it is still an investment. So I went to Amazon to find a cheaper option, and I found this little pink mug press. Now this was under $80, so much more accessible to a lot of people than something like the Cricut mug press. And in today's video, we are going to compare them to see how they stack up. For this tutorial, I have a set of free Sublimation PNGs for you. They are bookshelf mug wraps and they're really cute. I have one for an 11-ounce mug and a 15-ounce mug, and you can grab both of those for free. To find these files, you go to my craft library at heyletsmakestuff.com/library. Here, if you don't already have it, you can request the password. Once you have the password, you can go back to that same page and log in. This is Sublimation file S24, and there are two ways to find it. The first is to scroll down just a little bit on the page and click the Sublimation section, and that will take you down to the Sublimation files where you can find S24. The second way is to use the find function on your computer, so Control F if you're on a PC, Command F if you are on a Mac, and you can just search for S24, you'll be taken right to that file. There you will find three links. The first link is actually the download, so go ahead and click that first link and it will download the zip file with the PNGs to your hard drive. The second link is to the blog post for this video, and the third link is actually this video. If you ever need help accessing anything in my craft library, go ahead and give my team a shout out at hello@heyletsmakestuff.com and we'll get you sorted. For today's mug press comparison, I'm not going to go into how to print these mug wraps. I've actually already done it. I have a lot of videos on sublimation. Most of them include a tutorial for printing, so if you need one, go ahead and find another one of my videos. But for this one, I went ahead and printed 2 copies of that file on my Sawgrass SG-1000. Let's start by preparing our mugs to press. So I'm going to prepare these 2 mugs in the exact same way, and there are a few things you're going to need. Of course, you're going to need your mugs. Now, I'm using Cricut mugs. These are Cricut Sublimation mugs specifically made for sublimation. You can't just sublimate a mug that you picked up at the dollar store. You do need to have one specific for sublimation. So these are Cricut's mugs, and I really like them. They sublimate really nicely. You're also going to need some heat-resistant tape. You're going to need a lint roller, as well as some heat-resistant gloves. You're also going to need some butcher paper. So I am using a brand called Pre-Cut paper. These are specifically designed to work with these 15-ounce mugs. Keeps me from having to cut down a bunch of other butcher paper. It is a little bit more expensive, but it saves me a ton of time. So I'll go ahead and link these down in the description below. If you just have regular butcher paper on the roll, or if you have sheets, you can totally use those as well. You'll just need to cut them down. While I'm preparing these 2 mugs for pressing, I'm going to go ahead and plug in both of these mug presses so they can start to heat up. Like I said, we're going to press both of these mugs in the same way. So I'm going to take my first mug here, and I'm going to go ahead and lint roll it. You can also use alcohol and a microfiber cloth. That's actually my preferred method for mugs, but it turns out I'm out of alcohol, so we're using the lint roller today. You just want to make sure that you're removing any dust or lint, debris, hair, anything like that, so that it doesn't actually sublimate onto your mug. Once you have your mugs lint rolled, it's time to apply your transfers. So I've got my 2 transfers here, and I'm going to do the first one here. You want to make sure that your transfer is facing up because nobody wants an upside down bookshelf. And I'm going to wrap it around my mug. Let's see if I can get this in the overhead view here. And you really want to center it to that handle. So you are going to have a strip here that is not sublimated for this design. There are ways to sublimate under a handle. I've never been very good at it, so I just prefer to have that white strip. It's just easier. So I want to make sure I have about the same amount of space on both sides of my handle. I'm going to grab a piece of heat-resistant tape, just like this, and I'm going to tape down each side. Now you really want your transfer to be tight against your mug. You don't want any gaps or crinkles or anything like that. So I've got it wrapped here. Now I've already made these mugs once as a test in each of these machines, and I have found that for the Cricut mug press, which I'm going to use this first one for, I do not need to tape the top and the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave this as is. For the one I'm going to do in this bargain mug press, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to tape on both sides here. Now when I did my test of this before, I will give you a spoiler alert here. I found that the bottom edges here, just the bottom corners next to the handle, did not sublimate quite as well as the rest. So I'm actually going to put a piece of tape at the bottom of each corner here, and we'll see if that helps. Just like this. I'm not going to add that extra tape for the Cricut mug press. I'm just going to add it here for the bargain mug press. Now we're going to add our butcher paper. Butcher paper is really important when doing sublimation or infusible ink because it protects the inside of your press from getting any ink on it. So sometimes there is some ink that can sort of leach through the actual transfer, and you don't want that on the inside of your mug press, so we add butcher paper. Again, I'm using this pre-cut paper. It's just so easy. I'm going to wrap it around, and this is the Cricut mug press one, and I'm going to wrap it around from the top. You don't want any extra butcher paper beneath the bottom edge of your mug, just because of the way we're setting it in there. It'll crinkle and can kind of ruin how your mug sits in there. So I want to make sure that it is flush with the bottom of my mug but doesn't overlap. And I'm going to throw a long piece of tape under here, just like this. And that's it for the Cricut version of this mug. I'm going to wrap the butcher paper the same way for the bargain mug press mug, but if you do have that overlap on the bottom, it's not quite as important on this one just because you put the mug in sideways, but we're going to do it exactly the same because why switch things up? A nice piece of tape here, just like this. Now we're ready to press our mugs, and we can start talking about the differences between these two mug presses. So I'm going to start here with the Cricut mug press. And one thing I really like about the Cricut mug press is that it's sort of foolproof. You don't set the time, you don't set the temperature, and you don't set the pressure. All of those are already set for you with this press. So it becomes very easy to make mugs, especially if you're nervous about setting things like time, temperature, and pressure. To open and close this press, you use this little handle here. You can see that this closes it. If you heard it beep, that's because it's actually starting to count down the time for a mug that's not in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and open it back up. So I am going to turn my mug press here to make it easier, but I will show you in the overhead view what we're doing. So I'm gonna take my mug here and I'm going to slide it in. Sometimes the butcher paper can get caught. You don't want it to. And then when you're closing the press here, you wanna make sure that your handle is centered. So you can move it around here. Just make sure that it's centered so that it's covering the entire image here. All right, this is gonna count down while it presses my mug. If you wanna know how far you have until the end, there are some progress lights across the top. Like I said, it's not necessarily a set time. It's usually about 6 minutes, but you can see that progress bar at the top here so you know how close you are to finishing up your project. Slide that over here. And we'll talk about this bargain mug press. Now I find the bargain mug press to be a little bit more intimidating because you do have to set your time, temperature, and pressure. Thankfully, there are not a lot of settings, so it is pretty easy to do, but I am going to carefully tip this over because it's very hot. And I'm gonna show you here that we have 320, 356, and 392 as our options. And you'll just press the power button to cycle through those temperatures. So I chose 392, that's what you're gonna use for most sublimation, but it is nice that there are some options there for a lower temperature project. Then we have two different times here. We've got 300 seconds and 200 seconds, and you cycle through these using the time button, and I have it set to 300 seconds. So that's how you set the time and temperature, and to set the pressure, you are gonna use this crank in the back. You do wanna set your pressure before you turn your mug press on because setting it while it's really hot is not easy. So go ahead and make sure your pressure settings are correct before you turn your press on. Before I put my mug in, I do wanna show you here how this locks. So right here we have these handles, and this opens and closes, and then when you close it far enough, this lever on the top will slide into a slot and it will close. And that's how you close this press. Once it's closed, you can't open it without pressing back down on that lever to open it up. And I'm just gonna slide my mug in here, and I do find it can be a little hard just because it has this lever here. You just wanna make sure you're getting it centered. Then you're gonna close it and you're gonna pull the handles together until this locks. Now you'll notice that this didn't beep in any way, telling me that that timer is going to count down. So I'm actually gonna set my timer on my watch for 6 minutes because I have yet to have the timer work on this one. So now while we have both of our mugs pressing, let me talk to you about the pros and cons of each of these mug presses. My pros for the Cricut mug press are that it is very easy to use. You don't have to set your time, temperature, and pressure, which makes it really good, especially for beginners. Okay, this actually just beeped, so I'm going to pull out my mug. I have found that with the Cricut mug press, the handle does not get that hot, so you can pull it out without your heat-resistant gloves, but the mug itself is extremely hot, so you definitely don't want to touch that. You can use the heat-resistant gloves if you'd prefer. All right, back to my pros and cons. pros. My cons for the Cricut mug press are, of course, that it is more expensive and it is just out of the budget for a lot of people. It also has a larger footprint than this one, so if you are living somewhere where you don't have a lot of space, this takes up a little bit more room than something like this. And with all sublimation, I do find that it's a little smelly. So if you've worked with sublimation before, you'll know that a lot of sublimation heat presses and things put off sort of this disgusting fishy smell. And I remember when I first got this, because this is the first thing I ever did sublimation with, I definitely smelled that smell. Now I've had this now for 2.5 years and I don't notice the smell nearly as much, which is really awesome. But when you first get it out of the box, you probably will be dealing with a little bit of smell. Now while this continues to cook, let's talk about the pros for the bargain mug press. Of course, one of the biggest pros for a lot of people is that it is about half the price of the Cricut mug press. That is just way more accessible for more people. Again, it also comes in a smaller footprint, so it might be better for smaller spaces. There is also more flexibility when it comes to setting the time, temperature, and pressure, so you actually may be able to make more projects using this mug press than you would with the Cricut mug press. I also have some cons for this bargain heat press. When I first went to buy this heat press online, I found it in pink, just like this. I purchased it a little under $80. Great. I went to link this for you guys, and that link is now a purple tumbler press. So something got completely changed in there and this pink one is no longer available. So I found a yellow one. It was basically the exact same thing. And as I was writing the blog post for this, I linked to that and I was like, okay, great. Then I went to grab that link and the yellow one had changed into some other type of heat press. So now I have linked to a teal one that is similar. So I'm going to link to the teal mug press down below, but if for some reason that is linking to something completely different, just search for mug press on Amazon and you should be able to find something similar. Another con for me is safety. Cricut goes through rigorous testing to make sure their products are safe, and yes, there have been some issues, but there are a lot more issues with just cheap stuff made in China, and I feel like this heat press could fall under that umbrella. I feel like there are a lot more access to things that are hot on this press than this press. Like the heating mechanism here is really safely ensconced inside the whole machine. Here, you can touch it from a lot of angles. Plus the whole machine itself gets pretty warm. All right, my timer just went off. So to open this up, it's a little awkward. I'm gonna pull it over here so you can see it in the overhead view. I'm gonna pinch with one hand and I'm gonna open like this, and then I can pull my mug out. I'm gonna grab my heat resistant glove here and pull it out. And I will say that I find the handle on this one gets way hotter than the handle with the Cricut mug press. And I think that's because it is sitting above the mug here. The mug press has your handle sitting at the side, so there is not really a lot of heat radiating into it. But when heat rises and you have the handle at the top, the handle gets a lot hotter in this one. All right, back to my pros and cons. I had talked about how this one is a little bit smelly when you first get it, and the smell has faded over time. This one, really smelly. Like, I got it out of the package and it stinks, and it still stinks. I have not used it nearly as much as I have used my Cricut mug press, but every time I turn this thing on, this craft room stinks. So I will say that this one really has that sublimation smell. This one sort of has it. Now, I said earlier in my video that this mug press wasn't sublimating the bottom corners near the handle of my image very well. So let's check out how it did. First, I'm going to take the wrap off the one we did for the Cricut mug press, and we'll see how that turned out, and then we'll check the one for the bargain mug press. These are still pretty hot, so I'm going to wear my heat resistant gloves, and I like using my weeding hook to sort of pull up on the tape. It just makes it a little bit easier. I can pull off all my butcher paper, just like that. And I can pull back my design here. Now in the overhead view, you can see that this sublimated absolutely perfectly. On this side, we have a beautiful edge here, and on the other side, the handle's not very hot here, we have a beautiful edge on the other side. The color looks absolutely great. I'm really happy with how this sublimated. Now let's do the bargain mug press here. So I'm gonna pull off the tape here, pull off my butcher paper. This one is still extra hot, just like this. Even the butcher paper is hot, my goodness. Now I have a little extra tape I need to work through here just because I have those extra tape pieces down here at the bottom. I'll pull them off just like this. All right, pull those off this side. Now I taped these bottom corners down here like you saw on both corners, and I still ended up with some fading. So let's compare it to the Cricut mug press here. You can see here in the Cricut mug press that I have a very strong colored edge, perfect edge here, and then over here on the bottom I have quite a bit of fading and even just a little bit of fading at the top. Then if I go to the other side, you can see here that I have the fading here. I don't have it on the Cricut mug press. The top of both of these looks pretty good, but overall, I'm just not thrilled with the way that my corners near the handle look using that bargain mug press. I really hoped adding that extra tape would help this mug press those bottom corners better. However, it didn't. It's the same exact result I got with my test with and without the tape. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that to my cons list for this particular press, is that it doesn't give you the sharpest edges, especially those bottom corners near the handle. So overall, I really do like the Cricut mug press better. I know it is more expensive, but it just gives me a nicer press, and I think it is a little bit easier to use. That being said, if you just don't have the money for a press like this, I understand that this is not cheap. So if you do want to use something like this, just know the cons before going into it. You may not want to make full wrap mugs, or you may want to make things that are sort of watercolory where the edges don't matter quite as much. You may want to just make images that sort of sit in the center of your mug but don't wrap around to those bottom corners, just because I don't want you to get this mug press and then be disappointed with the results when you have those faded corners toward the handle. If you have either of these presses, I would love to know what you think in the comments. Specifically, if you have this bargain press or a version of this bargain press, I would love to know if you are able to get really sharp color in those bottom corners near the handle for your transfers. Maybe my machine just is a little bit flawed in that area, or maybe it's just an issue with all of these presses and I would like to know more. I hope you found this mug press comparison helpful. If you have any questions about either of these mug presses, I would be happy to answer those down in the comments. If you found this video helpful in making a decision, I would appreciate a like. Follow my channel for more Cricut, sublimation, and laser content. I'll see you next week.